The new HasLab Star Wars Mos Eisley Cantina has finally been revealed and we're excited to chat about it. Villa Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, and thanks for visiting Villa Varykino. I'm Kristy.
And I'm Matt. Hasbro ran a live stream this morning to reveal their latest HasLab project, the vintage collection Mos Eisley Cantina playset. As avid Star Wars action figure collectors and long-standing fans of the 4-inch, 3.75-inch scale figures, we're very excited to talk about this diorama set.
This was, unfortunately, revealed a little while back when Hasbro accidentally let the webpage go live and a few eagle-eyed fans managed to snag screenshots of this before they fixed their mistake and took it down. So we knew this was coming, but nonetheless we are very, very excited by it. As Matt mentioned, we are long-standing collectors of the 3.75-inch collection line. The vintage collection is fantastic, and we do really like the HasLab projects as a way of bringing these larger items to collectors' hands. First off, we're just so excited by this. We were excited by the tease shots, but the sizzle reel that they put out, all of those glossy high pictures, I just think this looks amazing. I know there are some talking points amongst fans and we'll get to those, but first off, we're just excited. This is just such an iconic Star Wars scene.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of detail here and you really need to take the time to appreciate everything that's going on. There's more to it than you can really fully absorb just from a few of the publicity photos, and we're going to try and break that down a little bit. This is a really interesting variation from some of the earlier HasLab projects, which so far have effectively been vintage collection vehicles. So this is a diorama set. It's really going to let you populate it with many, many figures and recreate scenes and elements of scenes from A New Hope, and I'm really excited by that prospect. So there are quite a few talking points that we want to touch on by the end of this video, but first let's go over some of the key details. This crowdfunded project will run from June the 7th, i.e. it's open now, through to 11:59 Eastern Time on July the 8th, 2024. For New Zealanders listening in, that will be 4 p.m. Tuesday, July the 9th. It comes in two different versions, a base version and a deluxe version. The base version is priced at $399.99 and the deluxe is $499.99. That's comparable to the previous HasLab projects. The Ghost, you may remember, being $499.99, as was the Katana, Jabba's sail barge. Razor Crest came in a little bit cheaper at $349.99.
I think it's really interesting that we have two price points for this. Obviously, you can't do like a sort of a half piece of a starship, but you can for the playset. And I do think there are positives and minuses to both of these versions. Some people don't like how closed off the deluxe version is because it does kind of create a bit of a top-down, sealed-off view. And I think that it's nice to be able to give a slightly cheaper price point for fans because both versions of this do include the figures. You don't need to. If you are just a mint-on card collector and you're a little less fussed about the playset aspects of this, you can go in at the cheaper price point and you still get all of the carded figures.
So all components are very modular. It lets you set it up in different ways on your shelf. The deluxe version lets you recreate the film set as was actually shot. That's the main distinction. But that's not necessarily the best way to view it. It does close off one wall. So in terms of dimensions, this is a very large playset. The base version comes in at 32 inches by 19 inches. That's 82.5 centimeters by 49 centimeters, nearly half a meter on the smaller dimension. The deluxe version is even bigger. It's 32 inches along one side and 29 inches along the other side. That's 82 centimeters by 73 centimeters. Very large indeed.
I know some collectors are going to be figuring out where on earth they're going to put this. As with all HasLab projects, they take up a lot of space. You do need to really think and plan. But the aspect of this playset is because you can kind of modularize it. You can kind of stretch it out and use all of the pieces to kind of create a really long sort of exploded open view of the cantina. So I think, generally speaking, if you want this, you're going to find a way to make it fit, even if you kind of pull all the pieces apart, which I think is really, really clever. This isn't a locked in place position diorama that you can customize it in terms of the walls and the layout, and you can kind of explode it out so you can really see in all of those nooks.
So both versions contain all of the sort of critical elements, such as the exterior entrance facade, the main cantina entry archway and stairs, the core bar down the middle, and 3 modular sitting booths for the far wall. Also included are 8 round tables, 1 large rectangular table, 4 stools, 15 short stools, 5 single-seater chairs, 2 double benches, 8 different types of cups, over 100 total cups apparently, and barware including pipes and accessories.
When you see the shots on the HasLab website, you can see all of these accessories laid out. My mind's like thinking about all the Ziploc bags it's going to take to make sure you don't lose any of these tiny pieces. But of course, not as many of the previous action figures came with the sort of bar accessories like cups and things like that. So I think it's kind of fun. And you can kind of expand the scenes by taking random other characters, random other aliens, and fill it out in case you're sort of waiting for reissues of action figures down the line, you know, like Luke and Obi-Wan. You can grab older figures that you already have and put a cup in their hand. I think that that's fun. And all of the chairs and everything, you can really flesh this out with far more characters than perhaps are accurate, but that's the fun of dioramas. It doesn't have to be exactly what we see on screen.
They mentioned cups a couple of times in the video, but realistically the bar would be pretty funny without cups. Both versions, both the deluxe and base version, all come with 3 figures in the initial offering. The exclusive Wuher Bartender carded figure, and of course the highlight, finally we're seeing the Tonnika sisters, Brea in her blue jumpsuit and Senni Tonnika in her green jumpsuit.
It's really interesting because both of these are mentioned as being on exclusive card backs. Now they do specifically call out that these figures are not going to be released outside of the set at this time. They specifically say they have no plans to release these 3 figures outside of the set, but they do not say that these figures specifically are exclusive to the set. Very, very careful with their wording here.
That's important.
They do give themselves a little bit of an out in case they do decide to release these figures on a different backing card later. I think that's really interesting. I don't think, personally, I would gamble that they will release these particular 3 figures later, but I know that that is an option that some people are going to be crossing their fingers about, because of course some people only care about the carded figures. They are less interested in play sets. They like that mint on card, and it is a bit of an expensive set to just get these carded figures. Obviously, if we meet the additional thresholds, there are more figures. You will get more than just these 3, but that is going to be a huge selling point. Personally, for me, I have been waiting and waiting for the day that we get the Tonnika sisters in the 3.75 inch action figure line, or merchandise in general. Generally doesn't exist out there. So I'm very, very excited. And of course, that is a big selling point for me. A little bit frustrating for completionists that they are kind of locked behind this expensive play wall. But I do understand that there is some technical, logistical issues about releasing these figures. So I am just happy that we're getting them at all.
Now, the deluxe set is essentially including duplicated parts with a few minor variations. So it's not giving you anything specifically unique. It just lets you build a bigger, dimensionally and in terms of detail, playset. It includes 3 more modular booth sections, more short stools, more single seat chairs, more 2-seat benches, and more round tables, as well as additional cups. Distinct to the deluxe set apparently are unique wall decor, so you can apply a few additional wall hangings outside your booths, for instance.
I can see a lot of collectors are going to have the conundrum of which version. I saw some people asking if they're going to come in the same box. You know, like if you are a completionist, do you need to get both? Are they going to look different in their packaging? Are these technically 2 different items? So if you're going to be completionist, do you need to buy both? You know, if you're going to keep it in box or something like that, the packaging could look different. Who knows? We don't know at this point. And I do see the positives and minuses. You know, you are spending $100 to get an extra wall. If you don't like the closed off look of sort of the 360 shape of the diorama, then you might like the more open one and sort of have everything clicked together and being accurate. But then if you want to fill out that scene, you don't really want to regret not getting the full set later down the line, because of course HasLab projects always do cost more on the secondary market later. So if you're umming and ahhing, it's definitely better to grab it at its original retail price.
In terms of modularity, you can lay this out in many, many different ways, and to be accurate to the physical set as it was filmed, you can use the deluxe components to wall it off and make it a symmetrical unit, but you can just spread them all out and have all the booths in a row, so you can have different characters occupying the different booths. That will still work, even if it's not technically screen accurate. It will make for a great diorama.
Especially great for fans that may not have the biggest space, because yeah, this thing is 32 inches by 29 fully assembled in its official sort of, that's a huge big block of land, and not everyone has space to do that. So I like that perhaps you've got smaller bookshelves, you can kind of put it in a line and sort of have a full exploded one, which we've kind of been doing without dioramas with our action figures. We generally just kind of have them in front of a printed backdrop on our display shelf because we don't have these full play sets unless you've been sort of sourcing these from the sort of third-party 3D printed fan-made kits. This is the first time we're getting a full plastic model. I'm just, the detail on this thing is so cool.
As with all previous HasLab projects, if the whole project hits specific thresholds of backers, additional figures will be released. Tier 1, the threshold of 11,000 backers, will be getting a Greedo exclusive Star Wars A New Hope vintage carded figure, including a blaster and a cup. Now this is described as a figure on an exclusive card back. Of course, they're not going to permanently lock Greedo behind a paywall, so the wording for that is very, very particular. They say on an exclusive card back. For Tier 2, if we hit 14,000 backers, we will get Nabrun Leids on a exclusive vintage carded card back. He comes with 2 blasters, a cup, and an interchangeable hose for his breather apparatus. Nabrun Leids was a Mosserian male smuggler seen in the Cantina. He is the 4-armed character with the big gas mask and the silvery jumpsuit. And for Tier 3, if we hit 17,000 backers, we will get Arleil Schous on an exclusive vintage carded card back. He comes with a blaster and a cup. Now, of course, Arleil Schous was the Devil fortune hunter. He is the Wolfman with the shiny red eyes. He is distinct from the Lac Sivrak, also sometimes referred to as a werewolf or wolfman, but he was just a Vanen character. So it's a little bit of a distinction there. This is a new Wolfman that we have not previously had, and that's a really, really cool and interesting looking sculpt for this figure.
I think it's really interesting that they've put the most unique figure at that top tier 3 threshold. There's going to be a lot of people really crossing their fingers that they get to that full 17,000 backers. Of course, these are just the 3 additional figures. If they hit the original backing threshold of 8,000, you do get those 3 original Wuher, Brea and Senni, Tonnika. These are 3 additional. So all up, you can get 6 figures included with the base model of this one, which is of course the $400 price point. I think that's pretty cool. Of course, these 3 additional threshold ones were all described as being exclusive card backs, not exclusive to the set.
And of course, the other thing to keep in mind is we have had a few of these released before. We've got Wuher released before, plenty of Greedos out there. Nabrun Leids has actually been released before. Arleil Schous is brand new. The Tonnika sisters are brand new. But speaking of figures associated with the Cantina on the whole, the HasLab reveal did talk about pipeline reveals. So we'll be getting some main characters that will fit into this series, and this may herald other characters coming down the line. So we can expect to see some of our heroes that we can put into this Cantina with new sculpts and articulation, hopefully, that will make them sit well and sort of feature well into this Cantina playset. So the pipeline reveals announced were Luke Skywalker, Ben Kenobi, Han Solo, and Chewbacca.
They did mention that Luke, Ben, and Han were going to be new figures, new toolings, but Chewbacca was going to be a half new tool. It was going to be his lower half that's going to be new. But of course, this is really exciting. Of course, collectors are going to want the new, upgraded, new sort of technology that Hasbro has been really putting into their vintage collection line. When you compare them to figures from 10 years ago, we're seeing vast improvements. So if you've got a shiny, new, detailed diorama, you're going to want really highly detailed figures that can also sit down pretty well. The new articulation styles really helps there. And I really hope that with this whole return to Tatooine as they teased for figures next year, I'm hoping we get like a lot more to really fill out. Perhaps not an official capacity, but we could see sand troopers. We could get maybe, a dewback, land speeder, a few other sort of aliens and denizens to really flesh out Tatooine. You know, thinking back, I'm still crossing my fingers that we get a new bantha of some sorts from the vintage collection line, you know, something a little bit updated, particularly since we've seen them in so many of the Disney Plus live action series. I'm really excited to see what Hasbro has in store with us, especially since they know that this will all tie in together, and I think they want people to be happy with their investment piece. They can really fill it out with some cool figures. And of course, good financial planning for them. If people with funds have backed this, you know that they're going to buy the other figures to match with the set as well. So of course, with every new HasLab Star Wars release, there are going to be some talking points, some positives and minuses that fans are going to have to consider when thinking about whether they're going to put their money and back this thing. So one of the main talking points is the fact that this playset doesn't have a floor to it. And I think personally, I don't actually mind this. I don't know where I'm going to put this, but I get the feeling I'm going to perhaps open it up and display it a little bit more open. And if this was locked down to a plastic base, I do not have the modular freedom to expand this playset and display it how I want. And I know that's going to be a sticking point for some fans. They're going to want to display it because this is very modular. They showed in the live stream, you can take all the pieces apart, you can take the backs, the walls off and things like that. So you can really display it how you want to.
Of course, when we're talking about the floor itself, you have to ask yourself, what does the floor look like? You may, if you think back, realize that it's not actually shown very well on screen in New Hope. And if you look at some of the behind the scenes photos, you will actually realize that the floor itself is pretty much just a studio floor. You can actually see some of the tiling between the floor covering that's seen. So it's not a strictly exciting floor. You can use whatever you want, a bench top, a little bit of textured material, or even something printed out.
Generally speaking, the only clear shot of the floor where we can really see the detail is, of course, where Ponda Baba is disarmed by Ben Kenobi, and we kind of get a little bit of a shot of the detail of the floor. This may not have even been present during the actual full filming because this is an insert shot, and when we look at the sort of scale of it, you're basically going to be dealing with something so flat and so thin, it may as well just be a printed sort of backdrop floor or just a white display shelf. I don't think the added cost of a huge sheet of plastic with just this very textured surface was really going to be necessary for a set like this.
No, and the main argument, as we've already said, is the fact that it will lock in the modularity. It will really hinder what you can or can't do in terms of configurations for this playset.
Another talking point is the fact that there doesn't seem to be a space for the modal nodes, the Cantina band. And I think this one is kind of interesting because it kind of lends itself to what do you really remember about the Cantina band and where they are in the shots.
Yeah, this is interesting. This playset is designed based on the studio set, the maquette that was designed in advance of the physical construction and the overall layout of all of that, and it is very accurate to those presentations.
The Hasbro team do reference the fact that they consulted with Lucasfilm's blueprints for the original set, so I think that they were really trying to do this as accurately as possible to the original set.
In terms of filming Star Wars A New Hope, those scenes where we see the modal nodes up on the stage are actually an insert shot. That pan across the band was filmed at a different location. It wasn't filmed in the studios in London. It was filmed back in the United States and added into the edit afterwards. So it would be really hard to make it match and make it work in terms of a playset without actually introducing a whole lot of inaccuracies.
And I think some people do confuse some screenshots out there of the Cantina band that are actually from the holiday special where they were up on a stage in a very different set.
Completely different set.
So I think I am a fan of the fact that Hasbro has chosen to be accurate to the full original set as we saw being filmed. I know that there are other instances in Star Wars where there are insert shots that don't actually match the original set. I'm thinking of the Outlander bar in Attack of the Clones, where there are whole scenes where they're sort of panning around. We see this. We know that they went in the special edition and put all sorts of insert shots in say like Jabba's palace that weren't filmed in the original scenes and things like that. So I am glad that we've stuck with the original set here. And because it's so modular, you can just create a space to put the modal nodes, put them in front of an alcove. They are not actually on this particular set. So I think it's interesting. They didn't kind of touch on that in the live stream, but I think when you really sit back and look at it, this is accurate. It does make sense that they are not on a stage here.
Yeah, and this is where the modularity really comes into play. You can just separate out some of those booths to make a bit of a space for your modal nodes to stand, and you still have the essence of the overall layout without really breaking it up too much. And I don't think they wanted to lock that in and force you to do it in any specific way.
Two other points about this that I know fans are going to be thinking and considering about is the perceived lack of weathering. Now, I know that this is a prototype. They make sure that they put that disclaimer on all of their images. And I know that they have a long time. This is not expected to ship until fall 2025. So they have a long time to tweak the final paint finish of this set. Obviously, what they did have paint effects applied. We saw striping and sort of detailing work on it, but they do have the element to be able to add in a bit of weathering, and we never know what the full finished production item is going to look like. But also, again, some people don't like heavy-handed weathering. When I look at some other toy lines, sometimes I can see people that have kind of stripped back the weathering on certain starships in particular because they think it looks too grimy. You can always go in here and weather it up yourself if you are somebody that wants it to look a little bit more grimy than it perhaps appears here. We also have to take into account that product photography has to be well lit to show all of the details. If this was dark, they would get accused of not showing things clearly. So it's under studio lighting, generally quite bright, where it blows out some of the detail. When you look at the detail photos, you can see all of the texture of this sculpting, which looks absolutely amazing. I'm not going to take this completely at face value in terms of the paint finish. The other aspect that I think some people may be quibbling about is generally when we think back to childhood, very large toys, very expensive toys had some components of lights and sounds. We always think of those sort of expensive toys. This one does not have any electronics in it, and particularly around the bar, this might be some detail that I think collectors might be a little bit perhaps thinking that they missed an element here because there is a quite bright lighting around the bar itself.
Oh, the underlit bar itself in particular.
So I think that there could have been a point here where they could have added some simple LEDs inside so that it would light up. I think that goes above and beyond just being a play feature. I do think that that adds a level of accuracy to it. So I personally think this is one of the talking points of this set that Hasbro could have included to perhaps bring in a little bit more of the skeptical crowd on board and think, yeah, we added a little bit more of a sort of bells and whistles to this thing. I know there are going to be fans that will essentially add their own lighting kits to this because I think that would sort of really amp it up a little bit. But I think that all said and done, it is going to be up to the individual collector about whether they think that this is worth the price point. I am a little bit upset with Hasbro in the fact that they give such a short window to basically afford these things. A few years ago, $500, that was still expensive. $500 now with the cost of living for a lot of collectors around the world. The funding window is only basically over one paycheck. So that is a little bit of a lump sum for a lot of people. For us personally, this only covers over one salary payment. We're not going to be able to spread this over, 2 paychecks. So with the cost of living for many collectors eyeing up whether they can afford this, Hasbro doesn't do this in payment plans. It's one lump sum, which I think is unfortunate. I would love to see Hasbro offer a payment plan like Sideshow Collectibles do, where you can place a non-refundable deposit, pay it off over 3 to 6 months, and you can afford it. You can afford several. We know that there are people out there that would love to buy 2 of these things, to open the figures, to keep them carded, to create a mega cantina display set, or to put them in different sections of your display room. I think that it's not even the item itself, it's the way you pay for it that could be improved. And I think a lot more people would jump on board if they made it a little bit affordable with either a longer window to let people save up and pay for it, especially since the backing window opens when the announcement goes live, and the fact that you can't pay it off over months. Sideshow lets people part pay off much cheaper items. There are $200 and $300 items available from Sideshow that they can let you do in payment installments, all the way up to their premium format and life-size statues, of course. This is certainly at a price point I think a lot of fans would appreciate a payment plan, and it's a shame that Hasbro doesn't offer that.
Now, of course, that discussion about the funding window isn't about the product itself, which we're very excited about, but it is an area that Hasbro could potentially put a little bit of consideration into to make it a little bit more collector friendly. And on the topic of collector friendliness, we've got a little bit of a personal take here in terms of the release, including exclusive carded figures. There's some characters here that have not been released or are unlikely to be released on these specific card backs again, which leads us to the conundrum of, do we keep them on the card backs or do we use the characters to populate this diorama, which is intended to be populated with action figures, even more so than some of the vehicles we've seen in previous HasLab releases.
Yeah, especially with previous vehicles, you don't have to put figures in the cockpits. You can grab other versions. With the Razor Crest, there are other Mandalorians, other Grogus that you can rip off their backing cards and stand them in the front, put them in the cockpits if you want. You don't need to touch the carded figures. Same with Yak Face with the Katana. You don't need to put these figures on the inside. For a diorama, it looks kind of odd if it's just sitting there with no figures in it. So it does need to be populated with the characters that we see on screen, action figures. And so this is, I think, the worst instance of the conundrum of, do I open the figures up or do I keep them carded? Or am I going to buy this and just keep them on their cards for years, crossing my fingers that one day Hasbro will release them on a standard card, and then I can open those ones. And then you're just sitting there for years without these figures in your diorama. Do you just kind of put them carded next to your diorama to sort of, yes, they're nearby, but they're not in the scene?
So I'm sure we're not the only ones that are facing that incredible dilemma of keeping the Tonnika sisters in particular on their card backs, or getting them out and putting them as a highlight central feature standing in front of that bar there that really draws your attention, which I think they would do. I'm not actually sure what we're going to be doing ultimately in terms of resolving that dilemma.
And I know Hasbro knows this because I'm sure there's going to be collectors out there that are basically going to buy both versions of this. They're going to buy the deluxe version for all the bells and whistles and all of the components, and the standard version because it includes all of the carded figures. So if you buy both versions, you can save a little bit of money and still get all of the carded figures, and you can open those ones up. There's also an element of just, that these are limited, and it's sort of like, you shudder at the thought of opening up a vintage figure to add into something. You don't want to sort of reduce the number of carded versions of these exclusive figures that exist out in the world. But Hasbro hasn't really given us a choice here. I know some people wish that they included both a carded and a loose version, or simply take out the conundrum altogether and put them in like bags, or just have them loose with the playset. So you don't need to open them. They know that the completionists out there want these special figures on backing cards so they can put them all together, but it does make it hard for the rest of us that do display figures loose in scenes. We've now got this awful, because the backing cards look so cool. I don't know what we're going to do. This is the first time I'm stuck.
It's become standard practice for Hasbro, let's be honest, and it's a topic that has come up when we've discussed some other vehicles or playsets in general, this issue of them coming with exclusive carded figures that we're left with the conundrum of opening or not opening.
I know that Hasbro does benefit this themselves, but I do think it probably benefits the secondary market more. There are going to be people that will buy this and split up the components. They will sell them, the different carded figures, individually, because they're going to go for a premium, because generally speaking, a carded figure is going to go for less than the whole playset itself. So you know that you can probably make back a bit of money, especially with those Tonnika sisters. They know that this is going to be a hot ticket item. You can go and take those ones out and put them on eBay and make some money back. I think this is going to benefit the resellers more than the actual collectors or even Hasbro themselves. I don't think too many people have the funds to go and spend $400 for 2 carded figures that are on their wish list. Who knows? Maybe there are a lot of people that are willing to pay that just for the Tonnika sisters so they can open them.
So all up, this is a project and a playset that we're very, very excited about. I mean, we loved Cantina Aliens. Fantastic, groundbreaking scene from A New Hope, of course, when it hit the theatres in 1977. Really strong memories from it, and I'm really looking forward to trying to fill this out with new and old figures of all sorts to really make it look, buzzing and interesting.
I think the detail on the bar here is just absolutely stunning. The high level of detail. Of course, they pointed out the IG-88 heads in there and all the little canisters of liquid and stuff like that, and all of the details. And you think about that each of these components needs individual tooling, individual molds in the factory. It's all got to be painted and assembled. There is such a complexity here. This isn't just a big rubber dinosaur that roars. This is complexity, and I do appreciate the time it must have taken them to design this, to build this, and I know that's reflected in the price. I do think this is going to be something that personally I'm very excited about, and I really do hope that every collector that is interested in this gets on board and hits all of those threshold targets, because I think this is absolutely stunning.
Yeah, so far it seems to be doing incredibly well. 6 hours in, we're at 2,800 plus backers, which bodes pretty well for us hitting that initial target. All of the HasLab projects that have hit their initial threshold have gone on to hit all the subsequent tiers and subsequent releases, and I hope this one will do the same.
Yeah, I think once people know it's going to be made, it's going to be out there, it kind of snowballs because everyone wants all those bonus figures as well. I know some people go back and, pre-order another one because they know it's going to come with all of those bonus figures. So they commit to a second one, as an investment perhaps, or maybe just, for fun times to be able to open up the figures and everything like that. I'm excited about this. Just can't wait to see where it's going to be available for us fans here in New Zealand. They haven't always been stocked stocked at all of the retailers.
easiest, no.
So they're a little bit harder for us here in New Zealand. There are ways to get around it if we really have to. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see which of our local stockers will get it. But yeah, we're definitely keen on this one.
Yeah, the local stockers is most likely to handle it. Probably won't announce it for a few days yet, so we're going to have to wait and see. But yes, super excited, super keen. Great project.
So thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I know this was a bit of a longer video, but we were just so excited to finally get this reveal from Hasbro. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. I hope you had fun. I hope you're excited about this playset as much as we are. So as always, may the force be with you, and we'll catch you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, check out our other videos, and subscribe for alerts about new uploads. Thanks for watching, and may the force be with you.